this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Oh, it's you! Good evening. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on radio. Tonight, we'll be looking at Sadiq Khan's plan to, I don't know, how can you describe it? Get people eating less meat in London and all of the rest of it. I'll be talking to Chris Morrison from the Daily Sceptic to get his take on it all. I'll be looking at Agenda 21. Have you heard of it? It's the United Nations Comprehensive Plan of Action to help achieve sustainable development. Is there a darker side to all of it? And what does it all mean in terms of control and other things we might give thought to? Plus, we'll be joined live by a real-life witch to discuss the rare blue moon that's been overhead recently. All of that and more, plus the thoughts of my panellist, Julie Cook, a thoughtful contributor and author. But first, an update on the latest news from Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you. Let's get you up to date with all the headlines from the GB newsroom. The condition of some public buildings, including hospitals, is being described as jaw-dropping as concerns grow over their risk of collapse. The chair of the Commons Public Accounts Committee is warning the issue of aerated concrete in schools is just the tip of the iceberg. Writing in The Times, Dame Meg Hillier says eye-watering sums of money are being spent on mitigating the risks. Labour is demanding an urgent audit, while the Liberal Democrats have labelled it a national emergency, which warrants an immediate Cobra meeting. There's been a huge surge in small boats crossing the Channel. GB News can reveal around 600 asylum seekers made it to the UK waters today. People smuggling gangs have taken advantage of a brief improvement in the weather and a high tide. The number of migrants intercepted so far this year now stands at more than 20,000. The RMT union says it's hopeful fresh talks next week can bring an end to their long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Up to 20,000 members at 14 operators have walked out this weekend, causing severe disruption with 50% of railways closed across the country. Meanwhile, members of the train drivers' union ASLEF, who were on the picket lines yesterday, are refusing to work overtime. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch told GB News a fresh proposal is the key to resolving the dispute.
We go into those talks with an attitude and a disposition to try and get an agreement, but there are some serious issues, as most people know now. We don't want to be on strike. We'd much rather be earning a living and running the service for the people who need to use it. So hopefully, if we can get a different mindset next week, we can get some progress.
The Home Secretary is being told not to use policing as a political football. The Police Federation of England and Wales says the government's constantly moving the goalposts, asking officers to be more involved, then wanting them to act like robots. It comes after Suella Braverman commissioned a review into activism and impartiality in the force. She says it can damage public confidence and officers should focus on tackling crime. In the United States, body cam footage has been released of a pregnant black woman being shot by police in Ohio. A warning, the video we're about to show you includes the moment before and after her death. 21-year-old Takaya Young refused to leave her car after being accused of shoplifting and was seen moving her vehicle towards one of the officers. A single shot through the windscreen killed the mother of two and her unborn daughter. A family lawyer says her death was avoidable and is demanding the officers are held accountable. Both have been placed on administrative leave while an investigation takes place. Bricks have been salvaged from a pub that's at the centre of an arson investigation in Himley in the West Midlands. Organisers of the Save the Crooked House, which was destroyed by fire last month, they held a ceremony and stored bricks in locked containers. They hope they can be used to rebuild the pub. 2 men have been released on conditional bail after being arrested on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. The Conservative MP for Dudley North, Mark Olongi, says the pub represents the area's industrial heritage.
This is a coal mining area, limestone mining area, metal smelting. This is the metal bashing industry that all came together a couple of 100 years ago to power the industrial revolution of the country. That's what's being torn away from us in the most brutal of ways. That's what we need to put back, and that's why there needs to be far greater protections for places such as this in Dudley, the Black Country, and the rest of the country.
India's launched its first space-based solar probe to study the sun. The Aditya L1 aims to study solar winds, which can cause disturbances on Earth. It comes just days after India became the first country to land a spacecraft on the unexplored South Pole of the Moon. The King and the Queen are attending the Braemar Gathering Highland Games in Aberdeenshire. The event's being held a short distance from the Royals' summer retreat at Balmoral. Charles is wearing a kilt in the newly created King Charles III tartan that was created to mark the coronation. The Princess Royal and her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, are also at the event. Well, this is GB News. I'll be back with more in just under an hour's time, but now it is over to Neil.
The ship of state's in a hell of a state. Rudderless might be the word, or holed below the waterline. ULEZ is the latest squall, but only a part of something bigger and more sinister, looming all around. Uncontrolled migration is part of the same man-made weather system, part of making people angry and keeping people angry. Neither is what it appears to be. ULEZ is billed as a health measure, but it's just highway robbery and cover for the introduction of more surveillance cameras, spectacularly vulnerable and temporary cameras, as it turns out. The migration is the free movement of people. Any British government that wanted to stem the flow or stop it would do so in a day, but the puppets pretending to govern aren't allowed to. I said the word to use about the ship of state might be rudderless, but that would be to fall for the carefully curated optical illusion. It's being steered all right, but by officers none of us proles chose and towards a destination none of us wants, except, of course, the people who plotted the course long ago. No one with a brain thinks Rishi Sunak is running Britain, not even his colleagues. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, another homunculus in a suit from the boys' department, loathes Britain and is laying waste to a once great city. And the puppet government is fine with it. Khan sows racial hatred and social unrest to accomplish the same destruction the Romans inflicted on Carthage by ploughing salt into fertile fields so nothing would ever grow there again. Keir Starmer and the fake Labour Party await their turn at the tiller, but all they'll do is shovel more coal into the furnaces, more speed towards the iceberg. It mystifies me that journalists interview these frauds as though they matter. I'd no more ask a senior politician what was going on in Britain than I would a character from a soap opera. Grant Shapps as Defence Secretary. Do me a favour. You might as well make one of my wolfhounds Defence Secretary. She'd have as much meaningful input to policy. At least Jessie's a real wolfhound. Don't fall for any of it. If I had the resources, I'd have "It's never about what they say it's about" plastered onto perpetually orbiting airships and projected onto the surface of the moon, where everyone might see it. ULEZ is the flicking tail on the elephant in the room, the monstrous beast that is Agenda 21, a plan for one world government, misrepresented as good news. For those thinking it's about the year 2021 and that we've missed the deadline, Agenda 21 is a plan for the whole of the 21st century. Whatever the puppet government and the puppet opposition say about anything is always and only to distract from the real plan and therefore the real threat to our freedom and way of life. The misdirection and downright lying infect and corrupt every aspect of life. Otto von Bismarck is credited with saying, "The less people know about how laws and sausages are made, the better they'll sleep at night." That depends on whether you want to be asleep or awake, however uncomfortably. The sleepiness is everywhere. A long process of miseducation at school and a forced diet of propaganda for the rest of the time has, for instance, seen to the rearing of a population that either thinks money and the economy are too complicated for them to understand, or has accepted the furry end of the lollipop stick handed to them by the powers that be. Inflation. What they would have us believe is to blame for the cost of living crisis, which is really a cost of lockdown crisis, is caused always and only by government working hand in glove with the banks to make themselves rich and everyone else poor. Inflation is caused always and only by the printing of money. Quantitative easing, as they have called it most recently, although dodgy types alighted on the tactic thousands of years ago to keep their subjects poor, is a transparent attempt to disguise a Ponzi scheme, the Ponzi scheme being modern currencies, which is the conjuring into existence of money from nothing, which only banks are allowed to do. Every time they magic up more money, put more of the currency into circulation in whatever form, what they actually do, in fact, all they do, is devalue any money you had in your pocket or in savings. This is deliberate. This is why excess money is created in the first place. Just as a for instance, since the creation of the so-called Federal Reserve in the United States in 1913, which is not federal, being a private company run for profit by secretive bankers and holds a reserve of precisely nothing, the actual value of the dollar has fallen by at least 90, if not actually 98%. Inflation is the invisible tax. I'll say that again for emphasis. The invisible tax almost everyone has been tricked into not seeing, far less being angry about. The same trick, a trick that would be illegal if any of us tried it, is pulled here in Britain by our own central bank, the Bank of England, and by central banks around the world, all of them in service to the Bank for International Settlements, in splendid isolation in Geneva, in Switzerland, where none of us can affect its operation in any way. Our government, everyone's government, be it nominally democratic, fascist, totalitarian, communist, or monster-raving loony, it makes no difference, uses banks to put people into debt and then continuously devalues the currency by creating more money, always out of nowhere, and so making it harder and harder, all but impossible, in fact, for anyone ever to be free of that debt. If all debt was repaid, all money would vanish. You heard me right. If you understand that much, you understand the money flow of the world. This stuff is hiding in plain sight, but so easy to understand when you bother to look at it. And I say that as someone who got a C in maths. It's easy to understand, but only if you don't look over there at the suspicious wildfires in Greece and the incomprehensible fires in Maui and the wildly lucrative war in Ukraine and a new COVID variant and the migrants being shepherded ashore every day and used most recently to displace students from their booked and paid-for accommodation to sow more fury. If you don't look over there at all that, or when you do, understand it for what it is, distraction gone awry, but back here instead, where the pretend government is cooking the books and selling Britain down the river, once you see it, you can't believe you overlooked it for so long. I said most of the value of the dollar has been wiped out. So too that of the pound, the euro, you name it. The national currencies around the world are Ponzi schemes, teetering on the brink of collapse and held up only by malpractice and lies. The next step, maybe not today and maybe not tomorrow, but when the people think they can't take any more uncertainty, will be central bank digital currencies. And here we get back to the monster, the elephant in the room that most neither acknowledge nor talk about. Indeed, that most don't even see, which is Agenda 21. ULEZ is part of Agenda 21. CBDC is part of it. Digital ID is part of it. Surveillance cameras and checkpoints are part of it. 15-minute ghettos are part of it. Cycle lanes are part of it. The devaluing of money is part of the softening up. The ever-increasing debt is part of that. The stoking of anxiety, of fear, of hatred of other, climate crisis and forever war, all about destroying the old and ushering in the new. In 1992, in Rio de Janeiro, 179 countries agreed plans for a sustainable future for planet Earth. Sustainable is a weasel word in this context, chosen to seduce. Just as everyone would support a project to protect puppies and kittens from cruelty, so no one would say they were opposed to sustaining life on Earth. Sustainable, in the hands of the authors of Agenda 21, however, is dread-laden and means your way of life, my way of life, and the way of life you'd hoped for your children is unsustainable and forbidden. In summary, the way of life that has been described as middle class is, according to those pushing Agenda 21, unsustainable and must end. The usual mouthpieces of the mainstream will dismiss this as conspiracy theory, but what is undeniable is that it's out there in plain sight. There's even a 344-page book available on Amazon called Agenda 21, Earth Summit, the United Nations Programme of Action from Rio, priced £11.04 in paperback. What someone somewhere has decided is sustainable is to be made possible by, to quote American campaigner Rosa Corey, the late great siren warning of all things Agenda 21, control of all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all food, all information and all human beings in the world. Corey pointed out how an unholy union of corporations, non-governmental organisations and governments is pushing ever more desperately towards a world in which the entire population is concentrated in densely populated cities. What's intended is a world of public-private partnerships, what the WEF's Klaus Schwab calls stakeholder capitalism, that takes all power and decision-making away from the people and places it in the hands of entities over which we, the voting public, have zero influence, far less control. A person can easily sense the impotent wrath of Khan, wee Sadiq, as he receives the daily reports of the popular dismantling of his ULEZ infrastructure, as well as a vast majority of his surveillance cameras being put out of action by citizen soldiers. God bless you all. The legal basis of his efforts is being challenged too. Worth observing that Sadiq Khan is being embarrassed not just in front of Londoners and the wider British public, but also in front of his pals in the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, of which he has been chairman since 2021. I don't know if you know, but C40 is, according to its Wikipedia page, focused on fighting the climate crisis and driving urban action that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and climate risks. It's also in bed with proposals to end flying and shipping by 2050, cutting home heating, banning beef and lamb, and ending building with bricks, cement, glass and steel in favour of rammed earth, what you might call the building of mud huts. Here's the thing, the future being discussed might permit existence for the likes of you and me, but will be no life I recognise as honourable or worth living. Altogether now, tell them they can stick the whole joyless, totalitarian, hypocritical, anti-human lot of it where the sun don't shine. Julie, I've had a bit of a frank disclosure of thought there. What do you make of the very concept of things like Agenda 21 and C40?
First of all, I think your speech was very rousing, and I think if you spoke like that on the street corner everywhere, we might have a revolution soon. So, you know, but it terrifies me. It terrifies me because it's worse than the elimination of what we call the middle class, the destruction of the middle class, of any kind of ownership or aspiration or hope of success, all the things that were drummed into us as kids. You know, work hard, you'll do well, try and buy a house, you'll do well. All those things are lies, and we know that now because all that will be taken away from us. But, I mean, I wouldn't mind so much if it wasn't being led by elites who then are complete hypocrites. So, you know, Sadiq Khan saying we all need to go on bikes, and he's in a bulletproof Land Rover, I think, driving around London. Emma Thompson, a famous actress who talks about sustainability and environmental issues, and she's on I think a mega yacht this week. Leonardo DiCaprio, he goes around the world flying around to see models, I believe. But even Sadiq Khan apparently racked up 12,000 air miles in 1 year or something, or less than a year. So our elites are telling us all this, but they're behaving completely differently, and that's what gets my goat.
Do you think that's what means that it doesn't actually come from a place where they genuinely believe in anything that needs to be done for the sake of the planet? They're just on board with something that crushes the people below them further down the food chain.
Yes, exactly. And I say, I don't deny climate change and that we need to do something about the world. I believe we need to live sustainably. I believe everyone wants that. They want to live in an environment that they can enjoy and they raise children in, without a doubt. But it's the fact that certain people are jumping on this in a kind of disaster capitalistic way to use that to, as you say, create fear. It's going to be feudalism. You know, it's going to be feudalism.
It is. It's neo-colonialism that they push elsewhere in the world, and it's neo-feudalism at home. But I've got to go for a break at the moment. After which, well, Mayor Khan is coming for your car, we know that. But will he take a cleaver to your meat supply? A personal allowance of 44 grams of meat is being advocated by some of Mayor Khan's C40 global network of mayors. But will he meet resistance to his plans? Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel. Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. There's a gaping hole in popular understanding of the state of the nation you can walk an elephant through, and the elephant is officially named Agenda 21. Out there in plain sight are proposals to steal from us our way of life and replace it with something poorer, colder and hungrier. Joining me to contemplate the part of all that, championed by London Mayor Sadiq Khan and his little wizards, is Chris Morrison, Environment Editor for the Daily Sceptic. Thanks for coming in, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
You've written recently about C40. Would you like to just elaborate a little bit on what that is and what it means?
C40 is a group of 100 mayors around the world, and it's been chaired since 2021 by Sadiq Khan. And if you look at what they write, you will see very clearly the agenda that they're following. And it's an agenda that, as you were talking about before, it's an agenda to remove growth from human society. It's an agenda to control us. It's an agenda to take away our cars, our gas boilers, everything that is worthwhile in society. I've been on this planet a few decades, and up until recently, it was all about left and right debated how you got progress, whether you use the state, whether more private enterprise. This is all gone now. The ConLab Green blog has focused on this imaginary climate crisis, which they've invented, which is not backed by actual anything that you would call a theory. It's unproven hypothesis. And what they're doing is they're looking to reduce consumption, and they provide the background for that. And so the headline things that they do, of course, are 44 grams of meat by 2030 a day.
Which equates to next to nothing.
It equates to 2 small meatballs. I measured it out in the interests of research. 2,500 calories a day as a ration, which is actually less than a working man would have got in the Second World War. 9 or 8 clothing items. They talk about...
in a year?
In a year. 2 flights every 3 years, short haul, no long haul. So if you have relatives in America or in Australia, we're back to the 1950s where you waved them goodbye and you never saw them again. And this is a dystopian world. This is a world that is hiding in plain sight because, as I say, it's a world where they talk about international, national and local, and it's all connected. And who funds C40? All the usual suspects. All of the green billionaire funders, who obviously are doing very well out of this subsidy-rich green technology revolution. You have George Soros is behind it. You have Christopher Holm, who runs the Children's Fund Investment Foundation, big financial supporter of Extinction Rebellion. And you have all the usual suspects, KR, IKEA, all of the big funds are all pumping huge amounts of money into this operation. It's big, and of course, it's not really discussed in the mainstream media because it would frighten the horses. Because if you read the report, which I've done, you will see all this laid out in plain sight.
Khan and his sponsors and the rest would say that it's for the common good. Is there any grounding in accepting that? Common good, greater good. I'm obviously, you can tell by my tone, very opposed to it, but are there grounds for saying that they are justified in any way in proposing what they're proposing?
Well, they use the example of ULEZ. He says it's all about health. If you look at the C60, the ULEZ London scheme is actually singled out for praise, and it's singled out under the heading carbon pricing. It is all about removing cars from the road. It's all about punching down on the poor. It's taking away the easy options to take away. They aim to take away most cars by 2030, 2040. They talk about 25,000 kilometres of cycle lanes. They talk about removing parking spaces. They talk about all of this, and they're doing it. We know that. We know that under COVID, they used the pandemic to close all the streets, put in lots and lots of cycle lanes. It's happening now, and it's a very odd thing, as I said earlier. I didn't think I would live to see the day when political parties would actually are they going to go to the electorate in the next election and say, we want to make you poorer, not just poorer, but considerably poorer?
How do you feel, Julie? You and I are both, we're just regular people, reasonable people. When you listen to this, what is your instinctive reaction to the very idea that rather than being invited to look for a better life, you're being told to accept something less?
It's terrifying. It terrifies me as a parent as well. It makes me feel there's no hope for the children that I've brought into this world. But also, my husband is from Romania. He was under Ceausescu's communism. And I was talking about your article with him and the grams of meat and all the rest of it. And he just sat there and said, that's like my childhood. That's communism. That's exactly like my childhood. You couldn't go from one area to another area of the city without your ID, or the police would arrest you. 15-minute cities. The meat thing, people would queue for hours for their gram of meat. I was speaking to his mother about it. You had, I think, 500 grams of meat per month for your family. And it just, when he said that, that's communism, I just thought, that's exactly it. But it's in plain sight. As you say, it's in plain sight. But what can we do about it? That's what worries me.
When you say that, what can we do about it? I think the Blade Runners and the rest that are actively taking down these ULEZ cameras seems to me an unofficial referendum on the ULEZ scheme. And furthermore, it has popular support. It even has outspoken support from, I won't name them, but people who are prominent in the public eye saying good luck to these people. Are we seeing there that Khan is pushing against something that he cannot actually overcome?
I think it's a tragedy this is happening because, we're in a TV studio, so we can't say, well done, go ahead. It is a criminal damage, and it shouldn't happen. But if you push people far enough, they will rise. And if you suddenly say to people, no more steak, no more cars, stay in your home, COVID lockdown all over again, they're not going to sit there and take it. Now, the next election will be interesting to see how they fudge this, because this is all written in all of the meetings they have at Davos, the UN. It's all written into what they're planning. Now, you can get rid of Khan. He's just a puppet, here today, gone tomorrow puppet, and you'll get some job, in some foundation or whatever, earn huge amounts of money. You can get rid of him, but what are you going to do? Put someone in his place? If you have two parties in this country, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, where you can't separate their economic policy or their green policies with a cigarette paper. So you will see a rise of popular discontent. And this is what's happening now.
Can you think of a way, would you challenge what Chris is saying, Julie? You're listening, as am I. Is there the alternative point of view that this is somehow for the greater good? Can you think of a way in which to phrase it?
I'd like to, as a journalist, say I could challenge it, but I'm frightened that I can't really. I think, if climate change is a thing, as the young people say, then, yeah, that perhaps is a greater good thing. But let's face it, it's about taking away our freedoms. It's ultimately about taking away our freedoms. And as you said, Labour and Conservative used to be two very different parties. It's the first time in my life in an election where I don't know who to vote for. If you close your eyes, you don't know who is saying what. So who do you vote for? How do you make a change? There is no way to change it by voting for those two, certainly.
Yes, I feel that I'm in exactly the same situation, that I am contemplating what basically amounts to little more than a spoiled ballot. You know, because I will vote because I feel obliged in terms of my social responsibility to make use of my vote. But I will have to vote for somebody that I know by definition is not going to be put into a position of power. And I do wonder at the divide that's forming, that's undeniable between the leaders and the led.
I always say that if I felt there was an existential threat and that we were heading for a climate fireball, I'd be the first person to sign up to C60. You know, we would have to remove fossil fuel from the mix if that was so. But it's an unproven hypothesis. There is not a single science paper that proves conclusively that humans cause all or most global warming. In fact, it's scientifically impossible to prove it because you cannot tell the difference with our current knowledge of the atmosphere, which is a chaotic place. You cannot tell the difference between what is caused by CO2 and the very small amount that we put into the atmosphere and natural variation. And what they've done is that they have confused weather and climate. Climate is a long-term trend, which they cannot. They spent 50 years trying to prove this hypothesis, and they cannot prove it. So they have demonised weather. And this is what they do constantly. Every summer, we've seen it in the last summer. You know, the mainstream media is full of these things. So therefore, on A Day Skeptic, I write a lot about science because it's important, because if there is a problem, we have to do something. But I'm personally not convinced because I cannot see any evidence that they produce. Computer models don't count.
Hold that thought, Chris. You're going to stay with us. We're going to go into a break and Chris will stay with us. After the break, we will look at the aims of the UN's Agenda 21 action plan. What sort of a plan is it, and is there a dark side to it? Jacob Reynolds from MCC Brussels will join us to discuss this shortly. Let's take a look.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry, here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you've managed to enjoy Saturday. It will be ending on a relatively fine note for many of us. Some late sunny spells to be had and generally a lot of dry, clear weather into the night as well. We'll allow for some mist and fog patches to develop into the early hours of Sunday morning, though, most extensively for central eastern areas of England. Further towards the north, we've got a band of rain pushing into northern Scotland. Could be heavy at times for the Isle of Lewis and the Northern Isles, but most of us will see our temperatures holding up around 13-14 degrees Celsius as we start off Sunday morning. So a fairly mild start. Will take a little bit of time for that mist and fog to clear, but eventually it will clear its way off, and many of us will see a good amount of sunshine throughout the day, feeling really pleasantly warm in that highs of 26 degrees Celsius possible across southeastern areas of England. Further to the north, though, that rain will be lingering across the Highlands up into the Northern Isles, so being a much fresher here, and gales around coastal areas for a time as well. High pressure will be hanging on into the start of the new working week, still though with that lingering front across the far north and also the isobars squeezing together across the West Country. So Monday, generally a bit of a breezier day for parts of Devon, Cornwall, definitely some coastal gusts, but elsewhere winds will be relatively light inland and there'll be a decent amount of sunshine throughout much of the day, again once that early mist and fog does clear its way off. We hold on to some of that sunshine throughout the rest of the week, perhaps a little bit more cloud developing more towards Thursday, but that's also where our temperatures will be climbing the highest. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The
the Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. We've been talking about how the powers that be seem determined to have us persuade us that a poorer, colder, hungrier life is all we deserve and for the greater good. To continue with that line of chat, I'm joined now by Jacob Reynolds from MCC Brussels, a body dedicated to understanding the issues of our time. Thanks for coming in, Jacob.
Yeah, cheers.
Agenda 21, I've been reading about it, we're aware of it. What is it and how would you present it to the general populace?
Yeah, well, I mean, you discussed it kind of quite, in some ways, quite nicely in your introduction and focused on the ways in which it's a kind of a vision, if you like, of what the future might look like if we were to kind of subscribe to the environmental and kind of sustainable goals that our elites are kind of so enamoured with. I think I'd make one slight distinction, though, which is that I think people who are against kind of Agenda 21 and the proponents kind of make a mistake in assuming that these kind of documents are really what set the wheels in motion of things. Actually, what they do is they reflect much broader assumptions of all of our elites. So if you think about whether it's kind of Khan or Sunak or anyone, they all sign up implicitly or explicitly to this idea that human beings are a problem, that human beings are kind of a plague on the planet. And in a way, all these documents, or the WEF or Agenda 21 or the kind of group of mayors that we were discussing earlier, like, they reflect these broad assumptions that elites have about human beings. And so it's no surprise that we see what to many people would sound like kind of shocking things about how our lives are going to be poorer, less interesting, colder, kind of no holidays and all the rest of it. Because those assumptions are really deeply embedded in our elites. And as you were talking about earlier, the fact that people are beginning to challenge these is what's really important.
Are there grounds for that? You know, Chris talked earlier about how the whole idea that we are responsible for what's happening with climate is a theory without any scientific consensus that means anything. Is there a justification for these so-called elites like Khan and the rest of them, and like Sunak and Klaus Schwab? Do they have any kind of justification for saying that we are a blight on the planet that has to be in some way wound back.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing I think about this is that it doesn't actually matter in a way what the science would or wouldn't say about kind of humans' impact on the planet, because that's not what drives these people. They don't care. If the science came back in a different way, it wouldn't matter to their worldview.
They have to have a reason, surely.
Yeah. Well, and their reason is these assumptions that they have, this ideology that ever since kind of a turn against the things that make human beings great. And that's what kind of informs all of their thinking. And so they commission research on the basis that if it doesn't come back with the right result, that human beings are kind of causing this or that problem or are responsible for X, Y, and Z. That's their worldview, and so they commission the stuff to get that result.
Something I find particularly, I suppose what I find most troubling is this idea of, well, you call it stakeholder capitalism or public-private partnership, this discernible move that there is to take the decision-making, the direction-setting away from us, away from people who can vote, people like us who have to live with the consequences. You know, they want to elevate it to a point where it's handed down from on high. Am I interpreting that properly?
Well, I mean, some people call this kind of nicely, I think, the kind of NGO industrial complex, this like sense that there is this web of organisations and governments that don't necessarily kind of collude in an obvious sense of the term, but they share all of the same politics, basically. And the governments go out, and there's millions of examples. Your article is, I think, got some of them in, and we saw it with regards to the so-called evidence supporting ULEZ on people, the effect it would have on people's health, is that governments commission research that gives them the results they're looking for. They go out, they have their favourite scientists, so they know that if they chuck them a few £100,000 for a research project, they'll come back with a favourable result. And so we can easily make a mistake in saying, oh yeah, it's these NGOs that are the problem. But really we have to look at our politicians.
Julie, we talk, don't we, about, you know, the people will rise and there will come a point that the people won't take this any longer. Do you think they will? Do you think there is a foreseeable breaking point where the people will say, you have got to be joking?
I think it's almost, it reminds me of Les Mis, Les Miserables. I don't think we're hungry enough yet. I don't think we're starving enough yet. I think when we've really had enough is when you can't eat, when you aren't allowed to heat your home, when you're not allowed to visit your very sick, dying child in that awful, crumbling concrete hospital that's falling apart. I think that's when it will break. But I think, again, when will that be and how will it happen?
Trish, I see you nodding.
Well, I was going to say, not enough blackouts yet, you see. I mean, I always say that if you have a really cold winter and we get high pressure that sits in January and it's freezing cold for a month and the wind stops and everything and there's blackouts and, quite frankly, thousands of old people will die, people will probably then start to sort of wake up that everything that's been proposed is a disaster, an insane disaster.
Jacob, do you think we are getting to that point that so far it's been just words, but when it becomes something that people experience and feel?
Yeah,
and in their homes.
Well, yeah, we're seeing this with ULEZ. People are seeing the effect that these kind of net zero assumptions are having on their lives. Also, we at MCC Brussels are kicking off a big project looking at the effect this is having on farming. So you've talked a lot on your show, I know, about the kind of influence of what's happening to farmers right across Europe. We've been going out, and me and my colleagues have been going out speaking to farmers across Europe, and that's one place where it really is having an impact. And you see very quickly that people push back, and it's our job, kind of people with the platform, especially like on this show, to highlight those instances where people are pushing back, because that's ultimately the only way that you can kind of overturn these assumptions.
Well, you've had sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say you've had 25 years of this virtue signalling. People, it's an easy virtue signal. Oh, yes, we're all in favour of saving the planet. And you were right, in your monologue, you talked about the way they sort of frame it, sustainability. You know, nobody wants to drown kittens. And so there's been 25 years of this virtue signalling, and everybody is sort of an environmentalist. Everybody is an environmentalist, in fact. Nobody wants dirty air and whatever. But when you start to say people, when they start to realise, oh, you mean my steak? Oh, you mean my motor car? Oh, you mean my gas boiler? They'll start to think, oh, I didn't actually sign up for this malarkey. I mean, this is not on. And this is where you will start, I think, to see a pushback. And already ULEZ is a small pushback. You know, they say, is it 1 in 6 old cars are being pushed off the road? And people are angry just with this one measure. Wait till they really start.
So I suppose what you're saying is it is getting real now, and whether people believe that there's justification in winding back our way of life or not is about to be revealed when it actually touches people's dinner plates and their pantries and their cars.
Yes.
And this is in a way where you see the kind of ideology that drives it, because it would be that you could imagine a transition to kind of less polluting fuels that was all about nuclear power, kind of massive electrification. You could imagine a kind of positive alternative. But the fact that they're not interested in nuclear power, that they won't kind of put major investments in these kind of things, tells you that really what drives this is not a kind of, oh, we would just want to live in a slightly more sustainable way. Really, they have a very, very different view about human beings should live. One that I think, as you say, when people realise what this means for them in practice, they won't accept.
Jacob Reynolds, Chris Morris and Julie Cook. Excellent conversation. Thank you so much. Got to go to another break. But thank you for all that insight. After the break, I'll be joined by a real-life witch, believe it or believe it not, to look at the importance of the blue moon. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds make a highly personalised attack on the government. Why can't charities stay out of politics? In My Take at 10, I'll be calling out millionaire socialist and eco-hypocrite Emma Thompson, who tells us to live diminished lives whilst cavorting on a 200 million quid super yacht. Plus my top pundits and tomorrow's papers. We're live at 9.
There you are. Where have you been? Julie Aspinall and Moon, anyone? We're looking from the day-to-day concerns of an evening. We may have noticed something different about the moon. Astronomers call it the blue moon, but they're not for the reasons you might think. And my last guest tonight is the aforementioned Julie Aspinall, a self-described witch. And she can tell us more about what's going on. Julie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello. Nice to
Hello,
speak
Julie.
to
Thank you so much for joining me. First of all, what is all the fuss about the way the moon is appearing to us this week?
So this week we've got a super blue moon. So we've got a double whammy. So a blue moon is when we have 2 moons in 1 month. So 1 calendar month, because normally we have 1 new moon and 1 full moon each month. But blue moon is 2 in 1 month. So we had a full moon at the beginning of August, and the other day we had another one. So that boosts our powers, that boosts the energies, if you like, that we can use. And to go with that, we had a super moon, which means that the moon is closer to the Earth. So it appears a lot larger and brighter than normal. So for us, it's an excellent opportunity as witches to boost energy in our spell work. And obviously the moon's highly important to us because the super blue moon's so rare. So rare. So it's really good for everybody around because you can use it for lots of different things. People tend to get into deep conversations with family members or partners and be able to express themselves better than normal.
Julie, we were talking here in the studio with another Julie Cook, and one of my previous guests. We had it, and I know too that people are sometimes very strongly affected by different phases of the moon. And it's not just, I'm not making it up, we're not making it up. We've all got anecdotes that we can recount about people close to us or known to us whose behaviour is altered given the phases of the moon. And it does make for a fascinating subject, doesn't it?
So in the 18th century, if you murdered somebody on a full moon, you could apply for a more lenient sentence in the court because you'd done it on, you killed them on the full moon. So they accepted that the full moon made people behave stranger than normal. And depending on what phase of the moon you were born, will also affect how you react in that type of moon phase. So I was born on a full moon, so I struggled to sleep.
Bear with me, Julie. Other Julie Cook. I like the idea of opening up to the possibility that we are affected by the moon. You know, we're mostly made of water. You know, we're affected by the elements and everything else. I find it an intriguing thought to be open to.
Oh, me too. And I think I hate to say it, I think women in particular are particularly more, you know, our cycles, they're called monthly menses, aren't they? Menstruation comes from the word for the month. So I think, you know, we are very connected to it, women in particular, I think.
Yeah, it's a fascinating... And there's folklore around it. You know, you describe yourself as a witch, Julie, and what does it mean for witches like yourself?
Well, the super full moon, it means that the energies we use in spell work, we get to boost them. So it'd be like a super spell. So if we want to do something quite strong, then that's the time we would do it. So we had our coven, we released lots of negative emotions through the moon, and we could feel the energies were so more powerful than normal. They really were. I mean, it was such a calming atmosphere. It really did feel like we were between the worlds.
Wonderful stuff, Julie. I love the idea. And I'm completely open to the concept. It's all we have time for this evening, though. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, all of you, for watching. Thank you, Julie Cook, for being with me and sharing your thoughts. We'll be back at the same time next week. Up next, though, is the wonderful Father Calvin Robinson.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you've managed to enjoy Saturday. It will be ending on a relatively fine note for many of us. Some late sunny spells to be had and generally a lot of dry, clear weather into the night as well. We'll allow for some mist and fog patches to develop into the early hours of Sunday morning, though, most extensively for central eastern areas of England. Further towards the north, we've got band of rain pushing into northern Scotland. Could be heavy at times for the Isle of Lewis and the Northern Isles, but most of us will see our temperatures holding up around 13, 14 degrees Celsius as we start off Sunday morning. So a fairly mild start will take a little bit of time for that mist and fog to clear, but eventually it will clear its way off, and many of us will see a good amount of sunshine throughout the day, feeling really pleasantly warm in that highs of 26 degrees Celsius possible across southeastern areas of England. Further to the north, though, that rain will be lingering across the Highlands up into the Northern Isles, so being a much fresher here, and gales around coastal areas for a time as well. High pressure will be hanging on into the start of the new working week, still though with that lingering front across the far north, and also the isobars squeezing together across the west country. So Monday, generally a bit of a breezier day for parts of Devon, Cornwall, definitely some coastal gusts, but elsewhere winds will be relatively light inland, and there'll be a decent amount of sunshine throughout much of the day, again once that early mist and fog does clear its way off. We hold on to some of that sunshine throughout the rest of the week, perhaps a little bit more cloud developing more towards Thursday, but that's also where our temperatures will be climbing the highest. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
This September, the GB News family is back together.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursday.